Good evening, day 6. Put yourself into a better place. I'm Robert Gibbons. I'd like to honor my mother Dorothy, my father Robert, my grandmothers Versi and Maddie, and my grandfathers Jethro and Sammy. Ashe. W.H. Auden said, "To experience a poem is analogous to experiencing the person." And tonight, I've selected a few works to share with you that gives you just that experience. Before I read from those 3 works, I'd just like to share a little James Baldwin for you. From his book, Go Tell It on the Mountain, the chapter entitled The Prayer of the Saints. And he dreamed that he was in a cold, high place, like a mountain. He was high, so high that he walked in mist and cloud, but before him stretched the blank ascent, the steep side of the mountain. A voice said, "Come higher," and he began to climb. After a little clinging to the rock, he found himself but only cloud above him and mist below, and he knew that beyond the wall of mist rained fire. His feet began to slip. Pebbles and rocks began ringing beneath his feet, and he looked up trembling in terror of death, and he cried, "Lord, I can't come higher." But the voice repeated after a moment, quiet and strong and impossible to deny, "Come on, son, come higher." Then he knew that if he would not fall to death, he must obey the voice, and he began to climb again, and his feet slipped again. And when he thought that he would fall, there suddenly appeared before him green, spiny limbs, and he caught onto the leaves, which hurt his hands, and the voice said, "Come on up higher." And so Gabriel climbed, the wind blowing through his clothes, and his feet began to bleed, and his hands were bleeding, and still he climbed, and he felt that his back was breaking, and his legs were growing numb, and they were trembling, and he could not control them, and still before him there was only cloud, and below him the roaring mist. How long he climbed in this dream of his, he did not know. Then of a sudden, the clouds parted, and he felt the sun like a crown of glory, and he was in a peaceful field. The Prayer of the Saints from James Arthur Baldwin's Go Tell It on the Mountain. I'm honored to be in your virtual company tonight. I have 3 works for you, 3 serious works. The first work I've selected for you tonight is from Adrienne Rich. The title of her book is A Change of World, by Adrienne Rich. A Change of World. Storm warnings. The glass has been falling all afternoon, and knowing better than the instrument what wind are walking overhead, what zone of gray unrest is moving across the land, I leave the book upon a pillowed chair and walk from wind to closed window, watching boughs strain against the sky, and think again. As often when the air moves inward toward a silent core of waiting, how with a single purpose time has traveled, but by secret current of the undiscerned into this polar realm. Whether abroad and whether in the heart alike, come on regardless of prediction. Between foreseeing and averting change lies all the mastery of elements, which clocks and weather glasses cannot alter. Time in the hand is not control of time. That's from Adrienne Rich's A Change of World. Her poem is called Storm Warning. Thank you, Adrienne Rich, for blessing us tonight. another very important Brooklyn poet that I know very well. I selected her work, A Woman's Season by Jacqueline Johnson. I selected a poem from Jacqueline's book called The Place Where Memory Dwells. Found her in between soot-covered floorboards and a burnt-out roof. Natural light reveals shimmer of copper. Here she ruled an old-time guard. Last time here she drove a Studebaker, danced a cakewalk and wore a feathered fedora upon her head. Through a side door see a girl child's room, a vanity covered with sachet, charm bracelets and first earrings. Owns so many clothes she repeats nothing for 2 months. Now sloppy piles of a man's clothes burn from acrylic to plastic fill the room. Hand-carved cedar wood beds, silken embroidered linen, antique dolls of a lifetime are burned. Little remains except blackened sockets where it all began. Through rush doors to an upstairs porch, women sit in their slips unseen, catching a breeze. Now it is filled with mattresses, dry, rotten, and rank from babies long gone. In the middle of this rubble, several lives deep, there is nothing except grandma's white shawl, ash-covered souvenirs, survivors of a flame whose odor still singes the air. And that's The Place Where Memory Dwell by my dear friend Jacqueline Johnson from her book, A Woman's Season. Thank you, Jacqueline, for blessing us tonight. Tonight, in this culmination of work, of wonderful work, we have heard from James Baldwin, Go Tell It on the Mountain. We have also heard from Adrienne Rich, A Change of Season, and my dear friend Jacqueline Johnson, Brooklyn poet, A Woman's Season. And tonight I selected one more beautiful female poet that I really love. She is from the Harlem Renaissance, and I think her work is like the culmination of the struggle. And so I pulled from my shelf the collected works of Margaret Walker. And I'm going to read Margaret Walker's culmination poem for my people tonight to end this day 6 of Put Yourself into a Better Place. For My People by Margaret Walker. For my people everywhere, singing their slave songs repeatedly, their dirges and their ditties and their blues and jubilees, praying their prayers nightly to an unknown God, bending their knees humbly to an unseen power. For my people, lending their strength to the years, to the gone years, and the now years, and the maybe years, washing and ironing and cooking and scrubbing and sewing and mending and hoeing and plowing and digging and planting and pruning and patching and dragging along, never gaining, never reaping, never knowing, and never understanding. For my playmates in the dust and the clay and the sands of Alabama backyards, playing and baptizing and preaching and doctor and jail and soldier and school and mama and cooking and playhouse and concert and store and hair and Miss Chumby and company. For the cramped, bewildered years we went to school to learn to know the reasons why and the answers to and the people who and the places where and the days when, in memory of the bitter years when we discovered we were black and poor and small and different and nobody cared and nobody wondered and nobody understood. For the boys and girls who grew in spite of these things, to be men and women, to laugh and dance and sing and play and drink their wine and religion and success, to marry their playmates and bear children and die of consumption and anemia and lynching. For my people thronging 47th Street in Chicago and Lenox Avenue in New York and Rampart Street in New Orleans, lost, disinherited, dispossessed, and happy people, filling the cabarets and taverns and other people's pockets, needing bread and shoes and milk and land and money and something all their own. For my people walking blindly, spreading joy, losing time, being lazy, sleeping when hungry, shouting when burdened, drinking when hopeless, tired and shackled and tangled among ourselves by the unseen creatures who tower over us omnisciently and laugh. For my people blundering and groping and floundering in the dark of churches and schools and clubs and societies and associations and councils and committees and conventions, distressed and disturbed and deceived and devoured by money-hungry, glory-craving leeches, preyed on by facile forces of state and fad and novelty, by false prophet and holy believer. For my people standing and staring and trying to fashion a better way from confusion, from hypocrisy and misunderstanding, trying to fashion a world that will hold all the people, all the faces, all the Adams and Eves in their countless generations. Let a new earth rise. Let another world be born. Let a bloody peace be written in the sky. Let a second generation full of courage issue forth. Let a people loving freedom come to growth. Let a beauty full of healing and of strength, of final clenching, be the pulsing in our spirit and our blood. Let the martial song be written. Let the dirges disappear. Let a race of women and men now rise and take control for my people today. Thank you, Margaret Walker. Thank you to James Arthur Baldwin, Go Tell It on the Mountain. To Adrienne Rich, A Change of Seasons. To my good friend Jacqueline Johnson, A Women's Season. And finally, to cap it all off, Harlem Renaissance poet extraordinaire Margaret Walker, For My People. Thank you so much for being in my virtual company.